Moin! I thought I'm gonna make a video about how hopper timing on Spigot and paper servers works. So, what is the problem? Well, the thing is, Spigot server and paper server by extension have the setting which allows you to change the check rate of hoppers. So, how often a hopper is gonna check if there's an item or an inventory above it. And by default it's 1, which is the vanilla value, which is great if your performance not going to suffer too much, but if you have performance problems you can increase that value. And I'm gonna talk about what value it should be. So you can set it to 2, which is perfectly fine. Pretty much anything's gonna work except for some very crazy stuff. And you can set it to 4 or you can set it to 8. It should always be a multiple of fraction. It actually should always be a fraction of the original hopper transfer rate. So TLDR I set it to 4 if you need performance. That's probably the best compromise between performance and stuff working. And I'm now going to talk a bit about why exactly you should do that. So I'm going to mainly compare 4 and 8 because 8 seems like a good idea and it's about 80 to 90% more performance from hoppers. So it means they take like 70-80% less of your MSPT, which sounds really good. And as hopper transfer, so how often hoppers can suck in items, is also 8. It seems like a good idea, but it's not. And the reason for that is that when items move above hoppers, if they only check once every 8 ticks, that means you need to move items at exactly 8 ticks. That means a basic sorter doesn't work because of update order stuff. It just basically it's 7.5 ticks above it, so it works most of the time, but not all the time. I-sorting is even worse because the items move faster, and yeah, it just doesn't work. However, if you set it to 4 ticks, it works perfectly. Like I'm testing it here. This is just a normal I-sorter, and like nothing ended up here after running it for like a few hours. Same thing here. I filled up all those double chests. Nothing gonna end up in the reject. Could probably test it any further, but with like a longer one. But it's pretty sure it's fine like this. So with 4. Pretty much anything's gonna work perfectly fine. With 8, it however just straight up doesn't. And the reason for that is that the way the checking works. So there are basically 2 types of hoppers. Hoppers that are linked to an inventory. So hoppers that, for example, is a chest or another hopper above or a composter. And hoppers that check for entities. The inventory checking hoppers just going to check the inventory above them if they can pull something out. The entity checking ones check the entire air block above it, or also if it's another block, they also check that block. If there's either a hopper minecart, a chest minecart, or just a normal item inside of it. And if there is, then they're gonna take an item in from there. The problem with the entity checking ones is that they're about 15 to 20 times less performant than the inventory checking ones. That's why you should always cover your hoppers with some inventory block, optimally a composter. Yeah, that is kind of the thing with the hopper types, but regardless of which, both don't properly work with 8 checks. But they do work pretty much exactly with 4 checks, and the reason for that is they just have an expanded range. So let's just take this as like 9 game ticks. It's like 9 game ticks. And if you set it to 8, it's going to check in the first and the 9th tick. And if you set it to 4, it's going to check in the first, the 5th, and the 9th. And if you now have any event, you can't really control where exactly in the script it falls. You can only somewhat control how long it is. So if you, for example, have a 9 block event, it would suck in 2 items. If you have a shorter event, it would suck in less items, and so on. But the problem is, in vanilla it checks every tick, so you're never gonna have any problems here. But if you check less often, it can lead to problems. For example, if you have an event that takes 9 ticks, it may suck in 2 items, but if it's like this, it's only gonna suck in 1. And the same is for shorter events. If you have a thing that's for example 4 ticks long, it may not suck in an item, or it may suck in an item. It's kind of random. That's also why sucking in items from a hopper stream doesn't work, because it's technically like 7.5 ticks that they're above there, and then it depends on the update order, in which direction it updates if it works. So, and the use advantage of 4 ticks over 8 ticks is that with 8 ticks, you can only guarantee to suck in exactly 1 item if it's 8. Because if you have 7, it can be that you don't suck in an item. And if it's 9, you may suck in 2. So it has to be 8 precisely. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you suck in multiple items, but in most cases it does, or at least in a lot of cases. So you need to get it to precisely 8. And also hoppers don't work because they are always basically 7.5. It's kind of complicated, and I also don't fully understand update order, but yeah, that's basically how it works. And the cool thing about 4-tick is that any 4-tick event will always register. So a 4-tick event, no matter where it is, will always need 1 check and 1 input. And actually an event that's up to 8 ticks long is the same. So you don't have to worry that much about how fast the item's moving across it. Doesn't matter if it's in an ice stream, in a minecart, or in a hopper stream or in a dropper stream. It doesn't really matter which one. Always the same applies. You can, with 4-tick checks, you can have them between 4 and 8 ticks long. While with 8-tick check, they have to be exactly 8 ticks long, which often you just can't do. That's just not something that you can do in all situations. And that's why it's so much better, because you have 5 times the range of speeds you can put items in. And hoppers also fall into that, which also, for example, allows you to do basic storage things, like, for example, just having a tower of chests, which just feed hoppers in the back. That doesn't work in with 8-tick checks, because they might end up in a higher chest. But like this, with 4-tick checks, it will always work. The same is in some edge cases. It might still not work. So for example, if you have here these rails which move over this block very quickly, and then this hopper has to suck in exactly 1 item, it doesn't work with 8-ticks. You can, with 4-ticks, it also doesn't work because it's too fast. But if you just put a water block in here, then it works perfectly fine on 4-ticks. On 8-ticks, that's not so easy. There are ways of getting minecarts to move it, for example, exactly 8 ticks per block, but that's pretty difficult and often isn't reliable, and it doesn't work. And with this one, you have enough range, so pretty much anything will either work, or you can very easily make it work. So for example, multi-item sorter, almost impossible with 8-ticks. Really trivial with 4-ticks. So yeah, I ran, that's the long-term test I ran. It spawns basically an item every 9 ticks, and you can see every single one got picked up by the first hopper, while on 8 ticks the later ones will pick up a bunch. Same here, I put a bunch of items in. None got actually miscategorized, they all went into those droppers. And it works without any problems. So yeah, that's why hopper checks to 4-ticks gives you pretty close to vanilla behavior with 4 times the performance basically. Wouldn't recommend it to anyone because it can break certain redstone conceptions, but it's definitely a better option than 8. And if you need the performance and can set it lower, then that's, in my opinion, just the best option. So that's what you should use.